Oh,
and I
thank
need
you
to
so
type.
much for joining me today, Judy Gregory.
It's my great pleasure. Thank you for asking me.
Oh, absolutely. We were just talking about the posters behind you, but I can see a DRJ. What's that about?
I'm wondering, oh, I see what you're looking at. That was a present from my children, and I've never figured out how to hang it up. So they're, cut out letters, and it's people call me Dr. J quite a lot, or Dr. Judy, and I sometimes think it's people are surprised that I have a PhD, and so it's like this and so that was a present from my kids, and it's got
Excellent.
glittery stuff all over it.
It looks quite sparkly. So
Yeah.
yeah, my bookcase is behind me. They are chockers with all sorts of trinkets and stuff. So I always like to look at everyone else's because I feel like it shows a lot about what they're putting in their shelves. Um,
I did
what they're
wonder
putting in their
about
mind.
what shelves I was sitting in front of because I'm sitting in front of my general reading shelves, not my workbook shelves, which are over the other side of my office. I
You
have
know
a
what?
bookshelf devoted to books about writing. So
Oh, I love it. I love it. That sounds fantastic. Um, so how long have you been writing for? Oh, for first off, what's your PhD in?
goodness me. Well, I did my PhD at quite a long time ago. I graduated in 2001, and I looked at how young people decide whether they're going to pick up and read health material. So I did my PhD in pre-internet days, and so I looked at brochures and postcards
Mhm.
and considered what kinds of things people trade off when they decide whether they're going to pick up and read something. And I came up
Right.
with this framework that said, if you're going to produce public health information about, say, harm reduction from alcohol, these are some of the things you need to consider. Like, who are you as an organization? Are you trying to make this message funny or not? And so I think there were about 10 different things that I suggested people should think about.
Oh, wow. And that's
Mm.
been very powerful across the board, to be honest, because you find that. So, my first thought is COVID brought back fastidious hand washing and hand hygiene in particular, and the rules, the
Mm.
social rules about coughing into your elbow and, not transferring germs from tissue or hanky to tissue. So, for me, I remember my grandma who grew up just after the Spanish flu. She was fastidious about her hand washing because they had that whole big public propaganda about, okay, no, you need to wash your hands. So all this information came out and was drilled into them, and it's come back. And
Yeah.
right around the time of a new pandemic. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that stuff
The
is so
time
important.
when I did my research, meningitis was a big issue amongst young
Mm,
people. So I was studying in the UK, and a number of young people had caught meningitis and died living in student accommodation. And so the topics I specifically looked at were how do you give information about a scary topic like meningitis? And how do you give information about a topic that young people don't want to hear about, like
mm,
drink less alcohol?
mhm. And the fact of the matter is, most of the time, any of these public campaigns, they do reduce the harm that's caused by what's happening. So they do reduce the instances, or they make people aware of a certain disease. They increase contraception use, or they increase, the use of condoms. That was a really big thing when I was in high school, because I think the US was going through a lot of HIV stuff, and Australia preemptively was like, "Oh no, if it's not wrapped, it's not on," or something like that. So we
Mhm.
had a lot of that when I was in high school, but then we also had heavy anti-smoking ads, and I find in my
Mhm.
generation it's really rare. It's against the norm to find a smoker, whereas in my mum's one, it was against the norm to find someone who didn't smoke.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these things do work, and I think that It's really important for this stuff to get out. You have to find new channels for it now, though, because a lot of the younger generations are just not watching TV like they used to or reading newspapers. They're all on social media. Well, it's so public health stuff. As a background as an acupuncturist and in health, I find it really fascinating. So your wall of writing, what do you use that for? What do you write in?
So I guess I would call myself a pen for hire. And so the reason I'm coming to Logan Writers Festival is about a book I've written myself, that's quite separate to most of the work that I do. So people employ me to write, to ghostwrite for them, or to edit or write reports or submissions, or pretty much anything. I mostly work in the community, government, and university sectors, though when people employ me to ghostwrite, sometimes I'll do things like memoirs and so on. And then on top of that, I teach writing, but I teach workplace writing more than creative writing. So I go into workplaces and help people work out how to write briefs, reports, emails, that kind of stuff, correspondence.
Super practical things.
Yeah.
That's such a skill in itself. I find that a lot of writers, especially in Logan, because we have access to the RADF grant, the Regional Funds Development Fund, Regional Arts Development Fund, because we have access to that, a lot of them are very hungry for grants, but not being able to speak the language that's needed to get those grants is something that is holding a lot of the authors back from getting their stuff through. So they're applying for arts grants because they're writing in fiction, but they're not able to get them because they're not speaking the language that the government officials want to hear, but what they're doing would completely apply for these grants.
Yeah. And it's that skill of, how do I communicate what I want to say in a way that somebody else can read it once and understand what I'm saying and be persuaded by what I'm saying. So so that's where a lot of my work focus is.
Yeah. Oh, that's really fascinating. Oh, beautiful. And so how long have you been working at these sort of things for?
I am not 20.
So not 6 months.
No.
You didn't take a short course in it and suddenly you're working in it.
I've been working as a consultant writer for, it's kind of hard to pin down, really. In some ways, it's all I've ever done. But I was on staff as an academic at QUT for more than 10 years, teaching writing there. And I left QUT in 2005 and went back to consulting. And for a short period, I owned a cafe, which is what I wrote my main book about. But I've continued consulting all the way through that time. So of relevance to Logan, one of the projects that I've worked on was with Logan City Council, looking at the way the website is written. So Logan City Council had a big project a few years ago where it redesigned its website. And I was a plain English person who came in and helped to think through, how do we write this content in a way that maximizes the chances that people are going to be able to read it and make sense of it.
Oh my gosh. And when was that?
I don't know. A few years ago now.
I don't think their website's changed much in the last few years.
20,
so their current
18 or 19.
Okay.
Something like that kind of recent-ish. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So their current website may very well be your work.
Oh, yeah, it's that website. Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Yes, it is. And it is so much easier to navigate.
Yeah, they won an accessibility award for it. So the people within council put a lot of effort into thinking through so accessibility for different kinds of people to be able to access it, and getting accreditation under accessibility guidelines. And they worked with other consultants around that. They had a lot of people in-house doing rewriting work and talking to the owners of the content. And it was the editors that I worked with. Yeah, they put a huge effort into that website, which I'm sure is continuing. It's one of those projects that never ends.
No,
Yeah.
websites are sort of like a garden, aren't they? After you've
Mm.
planted everything and you've gone through setting it up, you still have to water it, you still have to fertilize it and prune it and
Yeah.
look after it. So
Yeah.
it's definitely a living entity. Oh, you know what? The current council website is really good. I think it's very easy to navigate and it's very easy to understand, which is something I've always appreciated because I think the last website they had was really blocky and
Mm.
wordy in ways that didn't lend itself. So that's fantastic work. You should be
Well,
very
I
proud of
think they'd
yourself for
be
that.
well, they'd be very happy to hear that because it's the council team who did most of the work, not me.
Well, they've done a great job too.
They-
The Logan City Council is fantastic. They're very supportive of their community, and I love to see the work that they put out. Um, so have you've got mostly nonfiction, is that right?
Yeah,
Or do
so
you have a branch of fiction?
I I I am dabbling in fiction, but have not got very far with it yet. Um, so when I say dabbling, I mean that I've got a novel in progress that has been in progress for a long time. And I've recently had a short story published.
Oh,
And so
wonderful.
actually one of the things maybe I could talk to this a bit because this is quite an interesting project. So this book here, called Analog, it's badged as short stories from Australia's oldest new writers, and I'm not entirely sure that I'm happy with what
That's a
they
little
called it,
bit
but
mean.
there you have it. Go, folks. So
Uh,
it was put together by some people in Sydney. Paul Dunn and Carolyn Swindle put it together, and they've got a collection of 23 short stories in here, and they've done it as a bit of a not-for-profit exercise, and any money they raise by selling it is going to the Buy a Brick campaign for the Older Women's Network. So the profits from
ah,
the book will support housing for older women. And
oh,
so I have a
wonderful.
story in here, but so do 22 other not young writers. So I think the criteria were that you needed to be over 50 to be published in here. And they are loosely clustered under the theme of heat, but it's a really loose clustering, very, very loose.
Yep. Yep.
And so I'm gradually reading my way through it. It only came out last week.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Fresh off the
yes.
press.
Yeah, so that's nice. And so I'm really quite pleased to have a short story in there. And yeah, it's nice little thing to have brought out. So I'm planning to bring a few copies of that with me to the Logan Writers Festival.
Excellent. Oh, that's going to be so good. And I feel like it's a really good way to get people into reading and or reintroduce them to reading because those shorter stories, they're the ones that they have to grip you really quickly. They're always really engaging and they don't have time for any waffle. So you have to be encapsulated in it as quickly as possible. And you go on this little journey that's like a very short roller coaster
Mm.
and yeah, the short stories have something to them that I think the longer stories, short stories are such a better training ground for better writing.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's nice you can read them in one sitting. And also in an anthology like this where there are 23 different authors, if there's one you don't much like, well, that's okay. There's 22 others. And they're all really different, all different voices. Yeah, so it's a nice collection.
Oh, wonderful. So tell us a bit about the story you put in there.
The story I have in here is one, so a few years ago now, probably 2 years ago, I entered a monthly competition for short story writing where you write 500 words and submit it once a month. And this was actually the first one I wrote for that. But what I've put in here is the longer version. And in that particular competition, they give you things that you have to do each time they publish a story. So, like in this case, I think it was you had to use the word rose and you had to have something about food or, things like that, things that are seemingly random. And so my story is about the desert rose plant and somebody buying those plants to mark the passage of her marriage. And yeah, so it's about purchasing and setting out the desert rose and finding plants with
Ooh.
colorful flowers.
Oh,
Yeah.
lovely. And you just said you're in gardening gear as well. And we were talking about the flower and rose gardens and everything. So I think that's on point. I feel like there's something about authors and gardening and an extreme love for their pets. So they have one of or both.
Well, I have a pet, The garden, I don't have a very good relationship, I have to confess.
Oh no.
I have quite a large property with a lot of that cat's claw creeper in it that I simply don't have
Yes.
the time to keep under control.
Yeah.
And the project I'm hoping to do over the next few weeks is move a grass tree. And I think maybe I'm a bit crazy trying this, but the grass tree blocks my letterbox. And so I feel like I need to try and move it.
Oh, I always found that either a pet sheep or a pet goat will help with the
To keep the
noxious
grass
weeds.
down.
Yeah, keep the grass down, but they also they tend to get rid of the nastiest weeds because Australian plants are really hard on their teeth, and unless they're growing their teeth through like a wombat, I think it's a wombat that their teeth grow forever, don't they?
No
Um,
idea.
Okay, there's some animals that once their teeth are gone, they're gone. So horses, so any kind of European, a lot of American animals, their teeth are gone once they get worn down, which is why the silica in Australian plants is really bad for grazing animals. It wears them down much faster. But the introduced species, such as like a lot of the stuff that is noxious, European animals have no problem eating because it doesn't collect as much silica from the soil.
Oh, how
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah.
So, a little gardening tip, get a goat.
So I've got in my hands here the book I'm really coming to Logan to talk about.
I feel
So
like I have that one. Oh my gosh, hang on. I've got that somewhere here. It's in my
you've got my
pile
book.
of I think I've got your book here. It's in my pile of need to read it.
That's hilarious.
It's here somewhere. I can't see it. It's probably tucked behind a lot of other stuff. My desk is a perpetual it's a polite mess. You know what? I'm
I
gonna
call
call it a
mine an
polite mess.
archaeological, mine's an archaeological dig, my desk.
Well, it's like a finder thing, like you those hidden object games where you've got to click on things that are tucked behind other things. But you know where they are eventually. It's only for
Well,
the
it's
natives.
nice to know you've got a copy of my book there somewhere.
I
So I
recognize the
wrote this
cover.
book. So it's called Newbies in the Cafe. And this
Mhm.
illustration here, my partner drew this from a
Oh
photograph that we'd
wow.
taken in our shop. Okay, so this is
Oh
our coffee
wonderful.
machine. It's the group head for our coffee machine, and a cappuccino cup and a latte glass underneath.
Yep.
And so this book is about it's stories of people who have this dream of starting a cafe after they've had a career doing something else. So it's all people who've had done something else first, and then they've either bought or started a cafe.
Yep.
And I've got 11 stories in there. Some people highly successful, some people less so.
Yep.
And so as examples, my story of my own cafe experience is an example of somebody who was less than successful. And in some senses, I wrote this book as therapy because it was quite a traumatic experience for me. But another business that I've profiled is in Logan. And oh, goodness me, I'm having one of those terrible moments where my mind is blocked and they're going to just be so upset with me because
No,
the
no.
name won't
You know what?
come to me.
I know so many cafe owners in Logan. You just tell me whereabouts you think it is, and I'll
Yeah, well, I
probably
haven't
know
got any
them.
words just at this particular moment, so I can't tell you, which is
It's not
ridiculous.
extraction.
Yeah, it's extraction. Look, and here's a
Yeah,
picture
with
of
yes, with
and
Alex and
partner
Heather.
in there. So yeah, so I've got extraction in here as a story, and the story was written in 2019. I would have written this story. So they'd been going about a year then. And it's so good to have seen them going from strength to strength since, because I see their Facebook posts and they're obviously doing so well. So yeah, so they're one of the people I've interviewed, and then there's all these other stories about people who've had this dream and gone and started a cafe, and I've tried to pull out learnings, for want of a better word, things that other people who have this dream might like to think about. Then in the book, what I've done is the first chapter is about why does everybody want to own a cafe? Like, what is it about the cafe that makes people think that that's a great idea as a career move? And the last chapter is about, okay, so if you're going to do this, here are some suggestions. And I've got a baker's dozen of suggestions, so 13 suggestions that I suggest, and based on what I and the other people in the book have said, that people should think about if they want to start a cafe.
Oh, wonderful. I feel like the restaurant industry and cafe industry definitely get romanticized. I know Alex,
And
he's on the committee for the Chamber of Commerce as well, and we have our arts breakfast there once every 2 months. So Alex is fantastic. Heather is beautiful. And they are so, they've got a theatrical nature. Which I think that definitely helps them to succeed. But you get to romanticize them, but you also get to see the grittiness of what that industry is actually like. Yeah.
it's really, really hard work. And it's also it's a tricky industry to be successful in. It is very easy to lose a lot of money when you own a cafe
Mm-hmm.
because so in the work I do now, if I don't have any work, I don't have any expenses,
Yes.
so I own a computer and a printer and a phone, and I don't have any staff. And so while I need to earn money to live, I don't need to earn money to keep a business going. Whereas when you have a cafe, every day you're paying for rent, electricity, staff, software that you have to pay for, your
Yeah.
supplies, so your milk and your coffee and your bread, and all the
Yeah.
food goes off if it's not sold. So the expenses are relentless. And so it's a very easy industry to lose a lot of money in. And I lost a lot of money. I was unable to make the cafe grow enough to be self-sustaining. It just simply
Yeah.
didn't have enough customers. But what I learned was that I'm simply not the right person to own a cafe. Okay, I could
Yeah.
build the place and I could get the place started, but once it opened, I actually didn't like it. It's not the kind of work that I do well. And I was desperate to get out, but didn't know how. Yes, this is my book of therapy. And what I'm planning to talk about at the Writers' Festival as a thing for other writers is to talk about, well, why would we put together a collection of stories about people, and why might you go about, how might you go about doing that? So
Mm.
I had this idea that I didn't just want to write a book just about me and my story. And so I thought it might be interesting to people to hear about, well, how did I go about finding the other 10 people I've got in my book? And how did I gather the information and write the stories and get their approvals and those kinds of things?
Mm.
So that's
Oh,
my idea
so
for my session.
useful.
Mm.
Yeah. So useful. And it's in Logan, there's so many isolated gems that people could do the same thing with. So you've used cafes, but there are different cultural aspects in Logan. Like, we're such a diverse city. There's like different stories from different parks, different walks of life. So much that you could do similar things with, and it not only gives a bit of soul and heart from the people itself into that story, but it helps to show off what they've done, what they've learned, and helps to raise everyone up. I absolutely love it. I think I've read the first 3 in that one. I've got a book. I know it's here somewhere, and I've got it bookmarked as well. I always get like partway into a book and then I put it down because I have to go to bed or something, and then I don't pick it up again for months. Oh,
Easy to do, very easy to do.
absolutely. Oh, I think your talk is going to be absolutely fantastic. It's just what a lot of people need. I'm really
I hope
looking forward to
so.
hearing it.
And so I hope that people who want to um, either people who are interested in the cafe industry, but probably more so people who are interested in writing, might come along and simply pepper me with questions about
Yeah.
how you could go about doing something like this. So the other thing is that I self-published this.
Oh,
Um,
wonderful. Yes.
I did think I did approach a few agents. I didn't actually go to publishers in the end. And the reality with a book like this is that it's a highly niche book. It's never going to have a
Mm.
market.
Mhm.
And I really just wanted to get it out. And so I self-published it. And so the other thing that I can do is talk people through, how do you make those choices? how do you go about self-publishing a book, and how do you promote it? And so
Mm.
some of those issues I can certainly talk about as well. And my plan is to have the session as a fairly loose one where people can ask me the things that they're most interested in knowing.
Beautiful. Oh, that's going to be such a good talk. There's so many elements of that are that little bit behind the curtain. And to know them, it protects you from pitfalls yourself, but then it also, again, it just helps to raise everyone up and give them the understanding that they can do it too. So,
Yep.
oh,
Yep.
I'm so excited to have you as part of the festival. Thank you so much, Judy.
Thank you. That's my great pleasure.
So you will be able to see Judy on the 9th and 10th of September at the Logan Writers Festival. So come down to the Logan Artists Association and come have a coffee with her.
I look forward to it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much again, and we'll see you in
Okay.
September.
Thank you.